Hello, and welcome to Thursdays on the Stoop. Today we have Poetry as Resistance, examining revolutionary ideas in poetics and prose with Saskia Kercy. Saskia Kercy is a multidisciplinary scholar and poet from Philadelphia by way of Haiti. She has 2 bachelors in economics and global studies from Temple University and a master's in economics from Howard University. Saskia currently serves as a research consultant, educator, organizer, spoken word performer, and eldest daughter in her community. Her work has been published in the Amistad, for which she received the 2022 May Miller Creative Writing Award, the Washington Informer, and The Root, among others. She recently concluded a poetry residency as an Anaphora Literary Arts Fellow and is the curator of the elusive Sunset Saloon. In her free time, Saskia is a blossoming artist, yogi, and marathoner. She is at Saskia Kercy everywhere. Thanks so much for being here, and take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Sharing. Okay, great. So welcome to Poetry as Resistance. If you don't mind, I would love to get to know you all a little bit. So if you could add your name, your sun sign, and a cause that you care about in the chat. My name is Saskia. I'll just start us off. I am a Taurus. I just celebrated a birthday. And one of many causes that I'm extremely passionate about is Haitian self-determination, which, you know, perhaps is a little biased because I am from Haiti, but also I think as Haiti continues to be a reoccurring topic on the news, we're starting to notice the necessity for having increased discussions about how the United States and other imperial nations are trying to make Haiti a colony and why. So please add in the chat who you are, what your name is, and what you care about. Oh, sorry. Alrighty, I see a Marge, Gemini. Committed to the cause of democracy, yes, yes. Chris, a Sagittarius, childhood mental health, definitely. Sin, hi Sin. Also, I know I don't want my camera off. 1 second. There's always something in these things for me. Okay, well, it doesn't say my camera is off on my end, so I'll just keep going. What are some other things you care about? Alyssa, Cancer, disability and mental health justice, right on. Isaiah, Scorpio, Black liberation through art, yes. Mona, Gemini, animal rights. Rachel, Aries, sustainability, right, right. Will we have a planet to live on? Miriam, Aries, disability, mental health, yes, yes, yes. E.Jin, Cancer, third world solidarity. We're definitely going to talk about that today. Cass, Cancer, Foundry, East, Cotine, youth, mental health. Aha. Amy, Beth, healthy discourse, the planet. Yeah. Feel free to continue adding your name, your sun sign, and things that you care about, because it's going to just fuel our conversation today. And like Julian said earlier, make sure you have a pen and pencil because we are going to be doing some writing prompts. So I wanted to start off by talking about the role of poetry in society. So after brainstorming and doing a little bit of research, I came up with these top 8 roles of poetry in society. So the first is cultural reflection and preservation. A lot of times poetry and poets are the archivists, cultural archivists in society. And we see that especially when we look at some of our predecessors and icons and things that they were talking about and finding similarities between those historical notes and what's happening today. The second is expression of emotions and human experience. Who are we? What is our identity? How do we engage in society? How do we as humans engage with one another? Three, social and political commentary, which I should have spoke a little more about, but Poetry as Resistance is a series of workshops that discuss how poetry can be used as like a political tool, and in this case, social and political commentary. And so I hope you all are also ready to tap into some of that. Four, exploration of identity and diversity. Okay. Five, inspiration and emotion. Sometimes we just want to feel things. We want to express ourselves, and it really doesn't matter if, what other people think, but perhaps we might resonate with somebody else who's reading it too. The sixth is reflection on nature and existence. Seventh is aesthetic pleasure and language appreciation. Sometimes we just like a little wordplay, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And eight, bridging past and present. So considering we're going to be examining the role of June Jordan's poetry in society, I wanted to offer you guys a quote from June and what she defines as the role of poetry in society. So June Jordan says, "The role of the poet, beginning with my own childhood experience, is to deserve the trust of people who know that what you do is work with words. Always to be as honest as possible and to be as careful about the trust invested in you as you possibly can. Then the task of a poet of color, a Black poet, for example, as a people hated and despised, is to rally the spirit of your folks. I have to get myself together and figure out an angle, a perspective that is an offering that other folks can use to pick themselves up, to rally and to continue, or even better, to jump higher, to reach more extensively in solidarity with even more varieties of people to accomplish something. I feel like that's a spirit task." So that's what June says the role of a poet is. And so the first sort of question I have, the first idea I want us to reflect on is the difference between radical and progressive. So in the first workshop, we examined the role of Audre Lorde's work in politics and in social justice spaces. And we compared the ideas of resistance and revolution and talked about what the difference between resistance and revolution was. So I'm asking you guys to hop on the chat and tell me, what is the difference between being radical and being progressive? I think we use these words a lot, especially, when we think about sort of voting and politics. There's this camp of people who are liberals, there's a camp who's progressive, and there's a camp who's radical. But I'm curious about what you all think it means to be radical and how that might be different from being progressive. I'll give you a little time. You can also unmute yourselves and answer too. It doesn't just have to be in the chat. I should have mentioned that as well.
I might add something, Saskia. It just seems by definition, I don't know if this applies politically, because I think that folks who don't agree with progressive would call progressive radical, but progressive sounds like it's a sort of incremental progress from what came before, and radical to me suggests a jump.
Yeah, I like that. I see Mona mentioned progressive has a gentler ring to it. It's a way to explain a belief system to those who may turn away from radical. I think people are scared of the word radical, actually. Okay, Ida Jin says, I think of progressivism as pursuing progress within existing systems, whereas radicalism involves imagining new futures and possibilities beyond what currently exists. Yeah, I love that. Chris says, radical seems more active to me, more embodied. Isaiah says, the origin of the radical implies of the root. We've come to understand it differently in society, but it inherently implies a return to fundamental nature. Rachel says, radical is looking to the future, the next thing in cultural change. Progressive with the times as far as cultural change. Yeah. Continue to add things. Does anybody else want to grab the mic for a second and share the difference between radical and progressive? It can be in terms of politics. It can be in terms of literature. Let's see. Cass says, progressive as a moving forward, radical as jumping right out of the box. Right, Julian says, I think of progressive as working with what is, and radical as working toward what could be. I find it interesting, some of the themes with what everyone is saying here, that progressive implies this sort of incremental change within the box, but radical is sort of imagining what's outside of the box and then figuring out how to get there, you know, not working within the system, but trying to, you know, imagine a future where we are out of it, out of the matrix, you know? The reason I wanted us to start thinking about these two concepts is because a lot of the poems and poets that are examined in this series are radical poets. And, you know, I think it was Asada Shakur, who is not necessarily a poet, you know, but that's arguable, right? But someone, either her or someone akin to her, mentioned that, you know, they don't necessarily consider themselves radical because there are other people who are, you know, even more radical. And radical is almost like a perception. There's also this connotation, the negative connotation to radical. Like, oh, those radicals, like, what are they doing? When in reality, maybe people are afraid of what's outside of the box, which is why they sort of call people radical. And so we're talking about different degrees of change. Progressive is, you know, 1 degree maybe, and radical is, you know, multiple. So I want you to meet June Jordan. If you don't already know, June Jordan is, you know, one of the most sort of radical poets that, you know, is not only an educator, but is also an activist, an essayist. She's written children's books. She has 27 volumes of work over a 40-year period. She was also a professor that taught at universities like Yale, SUNY in New York, CUNY, and she was actually someone who went to Barnard in New York. It's an all-girls liberal arts school. But she had a lot of tension there, and we'll discuss a little bit about that. But June Jordan writes a lot about resistance. She uses her poetry as a vehicle, as a political tool, to not only discuss matters of her own life, right? She's deeply autobiographical in that way. She talks about her experience in her childhood, and she talks about her upbringing as a Jamaican immigrant. Both of her parents were Jamaican, and she has Jamaican and Panamanian ancestry. So she has this sort of diasporic understanding of Blackness. She was also a queer woman. She was bisexual. She was married for 10 years to her husband, and she had 1 son with him. But mostly in her work and also just like in her life, she identified very strongly as a queer person. And we'll see a lot of those themes in her work as we continue to explore her. But one of the reasons why I wanted to, or rather I felt like it was important and timely to talk about June Jordan, is because of her internationalist approach to poetry. So she wasn't only examining her own life. And I think as poets, right, it's sort of easy to think about ourselves, to think about the personal versus the political. It's easier sometimes to write about what we did yesterday, or how we felt yesterday, or how we feel today, or our memories and our ideas, and a little bit more of a push for us to do some of that social commentary, or even integrating our own experiences with what is going on in the world around us. And so we're gonna be looking at two of her poems. I'm not sure if y'all had the opportunity of reading them in advance, but it's okay because we're gonna read them and listen to her read it together here in this space. But she was among many of many prolific Black poets of her time and beyond. She was a member of the Black arts movement. So think Gwendolyn Brooks, think Audre Lorde, you know what I mean? And so my first question to you all that you can answer in the chat, I'm wondering if you know of any other Black women poets or poems. Do any come to mind? I, of course, mentioned Gwendolyn Brooks and Audre Lorde, but wondering where we're at, just a little pulse check to see what we know already. It doesn't need to be people that you've read already, maybe just people you've heard of. Right, Lucille Clifton, definitely. I mentioned one of Lucille Clifton's pieces in the last workshop I did, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Yes, Mahogany Brown, Kimon Felix, definitely. Was so grateful to have met Kimon in DC. Amanda Gorman, right? Young writer, influential as far as like her ability to sort of speak in these spaces like the White House. Okay, I don't know this one. Samaya Bashir, I'll have to look into them. Lucille Clifton, Tonya Monique Foster. Is this Donica Kelly? Let me know if I'm saying that correctly. Danica. Allison Rollins, Safia El Hio. Yeah, I just finished reading her memoir. That's not a memoir, but is a memoir. Elizabeth Acevedo. Nice. Portia O. Very good. I know, Mona, you got to type faster. They're on you. Let's see. Other favorites. Ama Kojo, Robin Cost Lewis, Donica Kelly, Nicole Seeley. Nicole Seeley's awesome. Vivie Francis, definitely. Maya Angelou. Nikki Giovanni, right? Toni Morrison, of course. Toni actually speaks very highly about June Jordan's work. And talks about her 40-year career as an activist and also her tireless dedication to her art. So they were definitely colleagues in that way. Adrienne Marie Brown, Lorraine Van Cleef Stefanon. Okay, you guys know people. Kate Russian, Sonia Sanchez, of course. Morgan Parker, yes. Ursula Rucker, of course. Philly legend. Ntozake Shange, of course. Nikki Finney. Okay, so we know some people. Jill Scott. Okay, I love that. Of course, Jill's a poet. I won't get too much into her though, because I have a deep connection and appreciation for Jill Scott. But continue to answer this question. And in the meantime, I want to sort of frame the ideas that we're going to explore in June's work. So some of the themes that we're going to notice, even just in these two poems, are resistance and defiance. The word defiance is important because June calls herself or refers to her work as defiant. She's pushing against systems of oppression, and she's fighting for marginalized people, not only in her area and community, but also everywhere. Empowerment and justice. June's work is deeply empowering. She's trying to cultivate a call to action for people and sound the alarms and ring the bells for people to get excited and get empowered about justice and, you know, and what that looks like to you. All right, identity. Of course, I mentioned that she comes from a background of being diasporic, being Caribbean, being Black, and being Jamaican. And so she discusses her experiences as an immigrant. She, of course, discusses race often in her work. Class, she was definitely for the working class. Gender, as I mentioned earlier, she's a queer bisexual woman, so she explores those ideas within her own identity a lot, and her sexuality. Okay, international and intersectional. So I mentioned that because, like I said, she not only explores the issues going on in her own community, which, by the way, she was born in Harlem. She was born in Harlem in the 1930s, I believe 1936. And, you know, in the 1960s, she's like in her 20s, which every sort of writer and scholar activist I know in their 20s is like on fire. And so she not only discusses issues that she's witnessing in New York, but she also has a lot of poems about the genocide of Palestinians. She has poems about apartheid in South Africa. And it all is connecting the different identities, not only in her life, but also the different identities of those people, of those marginalized groups. Okay, direct and honest. She uses a lot of ebonics in her work. She didn't want to draw away from that because she felt like language was deeply personal. And in order for her work to feel even more personal, she had to be honest about language. And one of the themes in her writing style that we'll notice is the role of repetition and the role of rhythm, right? That cadence. Okay, I see some people in the chat are still adding. Claudia Rankin, Yesenia Mantilla, November poem for Algeria, 1996. Kai Davis, of course, Philly Poet Laureate, Jasmine Mans, Ebony Stewart, Roya Marsh. Excellent, you guys know people. Okay, so as I mentioned before, this idea of the personal versus the political. I want to explain this a little bit before we listen to June reading the first poem that we're going to take a look at, which is Poem About My Rights, because especially right now, I think it's easy for us to isolate our struggle because each of us are going through something. I was in an Uber recently and I was talking to the driver and we saw somebody in a wheelchair on the street as we were driving. And, you know, she was like, why doesn't the city offer more resources for healthcare for people who need it? And I mentioned to her that, of course, we know, these sort of systems and institutions are businesses and are not really looking to care for people. But the experiences that this person is undergoing is not that far-fetched from our own lives. All of us are sick. We're all sick in some way, whether you have sort of like a mental health sickness or like a heart sickness or a back sickness or, a respiratory ailment or whatever the case, we're all sick in a way. And I think when we think about healthcare and struggle in that we are all sick, we can consider the fact that we are all struggling. But because capitalism creates this bubble where we only think about our own struggle and our own sickness, we isolate ourselves from the struggles of other countries and people. For example, I think it's safe to say that we've all heard about, Palestine versus Israel conflict, right? They're calling it a conflict still. After, right, 70 years or more if we're talking about the Ottoman Empire, but that's for a different day. I didn't mention, but I'm also a social studies teacher teaching middle school right now, and these are some of the things that we're talking about there. Separately, I'm also teaching statistics at the Community College of Philadelphia, so we're having a lot of conversations about society. And when we think about the struggle of Palestinian people and the genocide that they're experiencing, it makes me think about gentrification even in Philadelphia. So the genocide of Palestinian people has led to their displacement out of their homes. The gentrification of people in Philadelphia has led to the displacement of them in their homes. Our struggles are different, right? We can't equate genocide to gentrification, but we can find themes in those different experiences. So just because you are going through, your thing in Philly doesn't mean it doesn't resonate to an international struggle. And so the personal then becomes very political in that way. There's not an opposition of what you're experiencing individually versus this sort of common struggle, especially when everything is political. I think it would be a challenge for somebody to find something that is apolitical. Everything is political. And so this sort of question began in the 1960s during second wave feminism movements, where people were challenging the nuclear family because people in families were only thinking about their family and not the community at large. And so the feminists of the 60s and, the Black power movement sort of leaders came in and were like, what we're experiencing here is what they're experiencing there. And it is all a part of this system of violence and this institution of, marginalization that is not only evident where we are, but everywhere. And I want to continue to underscore that because ultimately the personal is political. What we experience here resonates with what's happening everywhere else. And so, as you continue to explore June Jordan's work in your own life, you'll see that she's talking about Soweto and, she's bringing to light these issues in other countries, even though it's not a part of her own personal experience, because she realizes the connection between international and local sort of conflicts. And so the first poem that we're going to listen to her recite is Poem About My Rights. It's about 4 minutes long. I'm just going to go ahead and play it right through. And then afterwards, I'm going to offer a writing prompt and we'll allow maybe like 5 minutes of just thinking of ideas. Of course, please take a screenshot or a picture of the writing prompt afterward. And I invite you to continue to explore this idea. But yeah, let's listen to June Jordan recite Poem About My Rights.
Poem about my rights. Even tonight, and I need to take a walk and clear my head about this poem about why I can't go out without changing my clothes, my shoes, my body posture, my gender identity, my age, my status as a woman alone in the evening, alone on the streets, alone not being the point being that I can't do what I want to do with my own body because I am the wrong sex, the wrong age, the wrong skin. And suppose it was not here in the city, but down on the beach or far into the woods, and I wanted to go there by myself, thinking about God, or thinking about children, or thinking about the world, all of it disclosed by the stars and the silence. I could not go, and I could not think, and I could not stay there alone as I need to be alone because I can't do what I want to do with my own body. And who in the hell set things up like this? And in France they say, if the guy penetrates but does not ejaculate, then he did not rape me. And if after stabbing him, if after screams, if after begging the bastard, and if even after smashing a hammer to his head, if even after that, if he and his buddies fuck me after that, then I consented and there was no rape because finally you understand. Finally they fucked me over because I was wrong. I was wrong again to be me being me where I was. Wrong to be who I am, which is exactly like South Africa, penetrating into Namibia, penetrating into Angola. And does that mean, how do you know if Pretoria ejaculates? What will the evidence look like? The proof of the monster jackboot ejaculation on black land? And if after Namibia, and if after Angola, and if after Zimbabwe, and if after all of my kinsmen and women resist, even to self-immolation of the villages, and if after that we lose nevertheless, what will the big boys say? Will they claim my consent? Do you follow me? We are the wrong people of the wrong skin on the wrong continent, and what in the hell is everybody being reasonable about? And according to the Times this week, the CIA decided that they had this problem, and the problem was a man named Nkrumah, so they killed him. And before that, it was Patrice Lumumba. And before that, it was my father on the campus of my Ivy League school, and my father afraid to walk into the cafeteria because he said he was wrong. The wrong age, the wrong skin, the wrong gender identity, and he was paying my tuition. And before that, it was my father saying I was wrong, saying I should have been a boy because he wanted one, a boy, and that I should have been lighter skinned, and that I should have had straighter hair, and that I should not be so boy crazy, but instead I should just be one, a boy. And before that, it was my mother pleading plastic surgery for my nose and braces for my teeth, and telling me to let the books loose, to let them loose. In other words, I am very familiar with the problems of the CIA, and the problems of South Africa, and the problems of Exxon Corporation, and the problems of white America in general, and the problems of the teachers and the preachers and the FBI and the social workers and my particular mom and dad. I am very familiar with the problems because the problems turn out to be me. I am the history of rape. I am the history of the rejection of who I am. I am the history of the terrorized incarceration of myself. I am the history of battery, assault, and limitless armies against whatever I want to do with my mind and my body and my soul. And whether it's about walking out at night, or whether it's about the love that I feel, or whether it's about the sanctity of my vagina, or the sanctity of my national boundaries, or the sanctity of my leaders, or the sanctity of each and every desire that I know from my personal and idiosyncratic and indisputably single and singular heart, I have been raped because I have been wrong. The wrong sex, the wrong age, the wrong skin, the wrong nose, the wrong hair, the wrong need, the wrong dream, the wrong geographic, the wrong sartorial. I have been the meaning of rape. I have been the problem everyone seeks to eliminate by forced penetration with or without the evidence of slime. But let this be unmistakable. This poem is not consent. I do not consent to my mother, to my father, to the teachers, to the FBI, to South Africa, to Bedford-Stuy, to Park Avenue, to American Airlines, to the hard-on idlers on the corners, to the sneaky creeps in cars. I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name. My name is my own, my own, my own. And I can't tell you who the hell set things up like this. But I can tell you that from now on, my resistance, my simple and daily and nightly self-determination may very well cost you your life.
Alrighty. So here's your writing prompt. So if anyone just has any initial feedback or anything that resonated with them or that they felt, please feel free to unmute yourselves and share. I wish there would have been some closed captioning there so that you could have been able to read along. But if you want to Google the poem, it's called Poem About My Rights, to just comb through and see how she writes it, what her line breaks look like, what she decides to emphasize most, how she uses repetition in her poem, and all of the different causes that she mentions in just this one piece. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. It's not about 5 minutes. It's exactly 5 minutes. But I want you to think about these 3 questions. And then I also want you to, or challenge you to begin a sentence using the phrase, I am not. So some of the questions I would love for you to explore are, how are your intersecting identities perceived, right? Whether it be your ethnicity or your gender or your ability. What political movements resonate with you? These can just be bullet point answers first. In what ways do you resist systems of oppression? Right? Are you an activist? Are you, rallying and marching? Are you boycotting? Are you, talking about it, having difficult conversations with your family? And just try writing a sentence beginning with I am not. I chose I am not because it's one of the phrases that she begins with in one of her sentences in this piece. So I'll give us a little bit of time. I'm going to mute myself, but if you need me, I will still be here. Would anyone care to share any of the ideas that came up for them in any of these questions? Or perhaps even how you finished the sentence, I am not?
I started writing something.
Yay. Would you like to share, or
If you want me to, if you want me,
please? Yes, I would love that.
okay. I am not a follower of coattails. The bandwagon can go on without me. I am not known to keep my mouth shut. When I'm in a group and something is said, I speak up. I'm not one to shirk my responsibilities or the repercussions. That's all I got so far.
That was a lot in a short amount of time. Thank you, Mona. Hi, Bimo. I see that you wrote something. Do you want to share something as well? Look, you got some hearts, Mona. Some hearts from the people. Super cute. Bimo, would you like to share what came up for you, or maybe what you started writing or exploring?
Sure, if that's okay with you.
Please.
Cool. So as you were reading, Sister Jordan, I had some reactions, and then when you asked this prompt, I thought I'd just speak directly to those reactions. So I wrote, I am not a man. In fact, I hate them niggas. I am not a man like white people aren't really white. I am South Carolinian traditions of grill master. I did carpentry, landscaping, trash removals, and 2 Home Depot runs in the last 8 hours. My voice is deep, my limbs are long, muscles dense. I stand to piss, sit to shit, explicit, but I am not a man. Yet I am because there should be warnings. I am because there should be boundaries. That's where I got so far.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know you were a poet.
We didn't have these conversations. We didn't talk about
I knew you were, dabbling in the literature, but I know it was like that. That's cool. I love that. Yeah, exactly. That was strong. That was awesome. I actually love that you started with I am not a man. And or would you say I'm not like these other niggas, something like that? I thought that was cool.
I hate them niggas.
Oh, excuse me.
Men.
Excuse me. Right. Anyone else? This is cool.
I would love to go.
Please.
I'm very excited that my work and BMO's share a line. So before I joined today, I was listening to a song by the Lost Boys. So I started creating a poem, and I used the epigraph from that to start it, which goes, you talk of revolution, but you're very much afraid. And then my piece continues, afraid of being tossed against the pavement, aimless as old news. I am not any more valuable. Afraid of looking like someone I do not know. Afraid of someone I do not know. Afraid to die. I talk of praxis, but afraid of practice because practice makes a lot of us dead. I am not a man. I am not willing to die.
Mona's shaking her head. It's cool when I can see your faces, because then I can see your reactions. But thank y'all for these emojis too. You got some hearts and some claps in here. Whew, powerful. I hope that you continue to explore this piece too. Anyone else? We have time for 1 or 2 more. Maybe just one. That's okay, because I want us to chat. So I'm wondering if it was more challenging to think and write about your personal struggles or social struggles. I know I mentioned earlier that I find that people find it more difficult to discuss what's happening in society, but I'm curious about, what that feels like in your bodies. Is it harder to write about your own experiences? Is it too traumatic? Is it easier to not think about yourself and to make it about someone else? For example, I find it easier to perform in front of a large group of people in a theater sense than it is to, recite a deeply vulnerable piece of poetry in an intimate setting. Let me see this chat.
I'll jump in
Yeah.
quickly. I would to your point about the appropriate space and time, when I am writing more social pieces, articles, op-eds, things that face to the public, I do have a hard time writing about societal issues because depending on publication, it calls for a certain level of unrealistic objectivity. And so like trying to express my personal opinions within those forward-facing situations does cause for me to like pull myself out of it. And that sucks. But when I do have a chance to express freely, I have no problem. Emptying the clip on the social conversations. But also, I'm also very aware that because of the kind of work that I do, I'm prepared to take the hits or get punched in the face for the quote unquote wrong or differing opinion. So that's where I am.
Yeah. And similarly, it looks like Mona says that the second prompt about political movements was the hardest, speaking up in a group, you know, and like you said, thinking about space and time. What makes you feel brave? A lot of our explorations in our writing force us or challenge us, I suppose, to be brave and vulnerable. But I'm wondering what makes you feel brave. Is it feeling represented in, you know, in the space that you're in? Are you a diversity and inclusion sort of person, and having representation makes you feel braver? Is it, you know, having more knowledge that makes you feel braver? As you all are thinking, I see Sin has responded. I originally found it easier to write about general political struggles in society before I found myself able to write vulnerably of my most personal struggles. Mona says, I feel brave writing about the past because everyone's gone and they can't come back at me. Okay, so Mona's a spicy writer. Rachel says, I find it easy to write about personal struggles, writing about what you know. I find it harder to write about other things that don't directly affect me and don't feel performative in some way. Yeah. Please continue to add that to the chat, but I want to continue to on to the next slide because we only have about 10 minutes left, but I am looking for people to read. So on this page, we are going to start reading I Must Become a Menace to My Enemies, which is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, June Jordan piece. June Jordan, again, scholar, poet, activist, professor, was alive between 1936 and 2002. And this piece was dedicated to the poet Agostinho Neto, who was the president of the People's Republic of Angola in 1976. So can I get two people to volunteer to read? One person can read the text on the left block and the other person can read the text on the right block. If you raise your hand in the chat, then I'll know, and then I'll pick you. It's that easy. There's 3 parts of this, so this is part 1. If not, I am happy to read. Okay, Isaiah, and then one more person. Isaiah, could you read the left block?
Sure.
Yeah, and then, okay, I can read the right block. There will be more opportunities to read. How about you get started? I must become a menace to my enemies.
I will no longer lightly walk behind a one of you who fear me. Be afraid. I plan to give you reasons for your jumpy fits and facial tics. I will not walk politely on the pavements anymore. And this is dedicated in particular to those who hear my footsteps or the insubstantial rattling of my grocery cart. Then turn around, see me, and hurry on. Away from this impressive terror I must be. I plan to blossom bloody on an afternoon, surrounded by my comrades singing terrible revenge in merciless, accelerating rhythms.
But I have watched a blind man studying his face. I have set the table in the evening and sat down to eat the news. Regularly, I have gone to sleep. There is no one to forgive me. The dead do not give a damn. I live like a lover who drops her dime into the phone just as the subway shakes into the station, wasting her message, canceling the question of her call, fulminating or forgetful, but late and always after the fact that could save or condemn me. I must become the action of my fate. Another reader?
I will read.
Yes, please.
How many of my brothers and sisters will they kill before I teach myself retaliation? Shall we pick a number? South Africa, for instance. Do we agree that more than 10,000 in less than a year, but that less than 5,000 slaughtered in more than 6 months will, what is the matter with me? I must become a menace to my enemies.
Last reader?
I can.
Yes, please.
And if I ever let you slide, who should be extrapolated from my universe? Who should be cauterized from Earth completely? Law and order jerk-offs of the terrorist degree. Then let my body fail my soul in its bedeviled lecheries. And if I ever let love go, because the hatred and the whisperings become a phantom dictate, I obey in lieu of impulse and realities, the blossoming flamingos of my wild mimosa trees. Then let love freeze me out. I must become a menace to my enemies.
Mhm. So here's your last writing prompt. What is the connection between love and revolution? We noticed that a lot of these, poets, not only in the Black arts movement, but also poets across ethnic backgrounds, especially indigenous poets, talk about this relationship between love and revolution. And now I'm asking you to write a similar sort of declaration of defiance against an injustice or oppression faced by you or society. And I want you to also explore this idea of fear versus courage that we see evident in June Jordan's writing. And this challenge is to begin a phrase with, I must become. I'm gonna put 5 minutes on the clock for this one as well. Or I'm gonna do 4 minutes actually, considering the time. Alrighty. Would anyone care to share anything that came up for them, anything that they started writing or exploring, or even just an idea that came up? I'm also going to offer a couple more questions too. Mona says, I must become fearless when needed, to have the courage to speak the truth. I must become one recognized as dedicated to revolution. Beautiful. And as you all are sort of, mustering up perhaps the courage to share, I want to offer something that I share with our kids all the time. And if we look at the word revolution, inside of it, we see EVOL, and that's love. And so there is love inside of the revolution, literally. And the reflection of revolution is love. And it's no surprise that a lot of, the writers that we know of, Baldwin, Audre Lorde, June Jordan, etc., always talk about love when it comes to revolution. And so some of the things I also wanted you to think about is how poetry can be used as a tool for resistance. Are we too polite about our oppression or about oppression in general? I feel like this society these days is extremely PC, and it's difficult sometimes to share in the way that feels most authentic. And lastly, in this sort of Afrofuturist idea, what does a future of no injustice look and feel like? If we were to consider a society where all the injustices that we care about are no longer in existence, what does it look like? What color is it? What flavor is it? There's no way for us to be radical and think outside of the box of systems and institutions if we don't start imagining those worlds. Okay, Sin says, are we too polite about our oppression or oppression in general? Is a whole poem in a question. Oh, thank you. Come on, come on, come on. Who's got some things, some ideas? Okay, Chris in the chat says, I must become the fire and the water. I must become patient and the treatment. I must refuse to pay just to have a job. Mary says, hi, Mary. Mary says, I must become the revolution in the face of injustice. We rise, continue the fight of those before me, raise my fist and resist, and I won't do it alone. We continue to love the world and all those who inhabit it. I am a lover. I am lover of the people. I sacrifice my time for their peace. Okay, sounds like a new piece loading. Love it. Ah, yes. Well, this is sort of, where we're going to conclude at. So feel free to share or just to continue to explore. Like Julian mentioned, this is recorded, so you can find it on YouTube. But these are all the ideas that June Jordan explores in her work. And as someone who is a professor now and engages with the academy and has always had tension with that institution, it's really cool to know that there is a scholar activist and poet out there, or scholar activist and writer and artist like June Jordan, who sort of crosses these boundaries between being an activist and being a researcher, a proprietor of knowledge, and also being someone who loves literature and sharing and language and is in the business of inspiration. And so thus concludes my workshop for today. 1 hour is never enough time, but thankfully I am easy to find, which is also a problem. But alas. You can find me organizing with the Black Alliance for Peace. Black Alliance for Peace is an international political organization that focuses on anti-war, anti-imperial agendas, and we have a chapter in Philly. Our next event is actually this Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. It's free. It's going to be at the Eco Foundation. If you go on the Instagram page, then you'll find all that information there. I will also be featuring my poetry at the Wilma Theater on June 17th at 7 p.m., which is really exciting. I will also be collaborating with a musical artist and a live painter to sort of curate this performance and be the artist that I'm trying to challenge and push myself to be. You can find me online, not only on Instagram, I am everywhere at my namesake, which again, blessing and curse, at Saskia Kercy. My email is also saskiakercy@gmail.com. And my website is bysaskia.co. All righty, let's see. Thank you. Oh, I pulled you out of retirement, BMO. That's cool. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Come if you can, but no force, no pressure. I would leave this space challenging everybody to join a political organization if possible, or support one, to challenge your writing and your work, to not only include these sort of personal ideas, but also things happening in the world around you, and finding those connections and bridging the political and the the personal and the political, and exploring more of June Jordan's work, especially at this time. So Julian, I'm going to give it to you. Thank you all so much. And oh my gosh, I don't know if I should mention or Julian should mention, but I will be doing more work with Blue Stoop coming up. So stay tuned. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Saskia. Thank you to everyone who participated today. You guys are an awesome crowd. About to share some links in the chat. Take a look at those, please. Those are links to next week's Thursdays on the Stoop, which will be the last one of the season. It'll be with Autumn Konopka. It'll be about writing challenging topics, so don't miss that. There's also a feedback form where you can let Saskia know what a fantastic job she did and share some information about yourself that helps us apply for grants, which we need. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's free. It's got lots of great resources in it. And of course, you can always donate. We'll never say no to that. Stay tuned for updates about this summer's programming, including a very cool session with Saskia and Gabriel Ramirez. Lots of good things coming down the pipe. So thanks for being here and enjoy the rest of your day.
Peace, everyone. Be safe, be well.
Thank you.